I get up there,
My name is Rob Port. I'm with SanityVlog.com, and welcome to the Tea Party. Thank you all for coming and taking time out of your busy summer schedules. I know it's always hard to fit events in the summer since usually North Dakota is such a short summer. But thank you all for being here and taking your time. We invited all the political candidates to be here. Some of them showed up. We have House candidate Kevin Cramer's here. We have a representative from Senate candidate Rick Berg's campaign. Public Service Commission candidate Randy Crispin's here. So they're going to be inviting them up here in a moment too to have their say, and hopefully you'll have a chance to talk with them. We wanted to hold another Tea Party in Minot. We held one a few years ago, and we had 600 people. We had an enormous crowd. People were fired up. And you know, since then it seems like a lot of the attitudes changed about the Tea Party. It's become more organized nationally. There's groups. The Tea Party has spokesmen. The Tea Party has lobbyists now. And you know, I think we just thought it was time. The Tea Party in Minot's never really been organized. We just thought it was time to hold another event and to talk about where we're at now. Some pretty profound things have happened in the country, I think, since the last time we had a Tea Party. We had the Supreme Court come out and tell us that it's okay for the government to tax us for doing nothing. We could be taxed now for not engaging in an activity. You know, we've had the president just today announced through an executive order that we were going to be gutting a lot of the welfare reform that Republicans pushed through in the 1990s with an executive order. I heard Paul Ryan put it, I thought, great this week. He said that our last chance to undo a lot of what's been done under President Obama is this election. And I think conservatives struggle with a lot of that, because a lot of times we look at our candidates and we see people who are maybe less than perfect, less than ideal, less than maybe what we would design ourselves if we could design a candidate. And you know, I think that's what events like this are for, is to come together and to try to build a consensus about what we stand for, what we're going to support, and what's the best direction for this country to take. And we do have some support. I mean, there are still some people out there. My family has actually had a friendship with the Palin family in Alaska for a long time. My mother's actually got a letter from Sarah Palin for the Minot Tea Party, which she wanted to read, as well as another letter she got from Governor Scott Walker, so I think she was going to read those right now. This is my mother, Carol Port.
I get so tired of, can you hear me?
Yes.
I get so tired of people talking about Minot being the end of the world. So I was thinking big, and I invited some big names. And I spoke with Todd Palin, and they were really going to try to come, Sarah and Todd. But her public relations person or whatever had scheduled her for something else, and this is in his fishing season. But Sarah did write a letter. She says, "Dear North Dakota Tea Party Caucus, thank you for your excellent efforts in the Peace Garden State. I know many of you were hit especially hard by the flood of June 2011, and your determination and grit in rebuilding your community is an inspiration to all of us. You formed lasting bonds of friendship as strangers help strangers. Churches opened doors to relief workers, and everyone pulled together. It's a shining example of how community works best when good people simply come together to help each other. It doesn't require expensive government bureaucracy or needless interference. It just requires the big-hearted optimism, fortitude, and hard work of North Dakotans like all of you. It is these very qualities that make your involvement in our nation's political discourse so valuable to your fellow Americans. North Dakotans understand what it takes to get our country back on the right track by returning to the time-trusted truths that have historically made us exceptional. Though much of the focus this year will be on the presidential race, common sense conservatives and independent Americans in the Tea Party must also be committed to taking back the Senate in 2012, just as we took back the House in 2010. We must remember that our goal isn't simply to change the majority in control of Senate. The real question is who will be part of that new majority. We need principled conservatives, and we should expect our Tea Party candidates to be given leadership responsibilities. I know that we can count on you to unite and lead in this election just as you did in 2010. God bless you all, and God bless America. With an Alaskan heart, Sarah Palin. And then I got to thinking really big, and I invited Governor Walker because I admired him so much. And he, of course, couldn't come, but he did send a letter. He says, "Fellow Americans, last June, voters went to the polls in Wisconsin's historic recall election, and a silent majority cast their ballots to deliver a win for the hardworking taxpayers. Facing millions of dollars spent by out-of-state special interests, we started a ground-up grassroots movement in Wisconsin for limited government, lower taxes, a balanced budget, and more jobs. As we head to November, we'll see the same special interests attempt to influence the presidential election, and we need all of the grassroots energy available to overcome the big government Obama political machine." In 2008, candidate Barack Obama called America's debt unpatriotic. Now, after 4 years of his failed policies, President Obama has added $5 trillion to our debt. That's over $16,000 for every man, woman, and child in North Dakota. At this rate, we literally cannot afford Barack Obama as president for another 4 years. As our debt reaches the paralyzing levels of European nations, and as China gains ground on America in the world economy, we must not accept the doing just fine attitude this president speaks of. A vote for a second Obama term is admitting that America's best days are behind her. I believe America's best days are ahead, but we cannot stand idly by and watch our government go against the principles upon which our nation was founded. We must work hard to stand up for what has made America the greatest nation on earth. I want to share with you an important passage from Wisconsin's Constitution. Article 1, Section 22 reads so eloquently: "The blessings of a free government can only be maintained by a firm adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, frugality, and virtue, and by frequent reoccurrence to fundamental principles." As we saw in Wisconsin, when conservatives unite behind the fundamental principles of frugality and moderation in government, we will see freedom and prosperity for we the people. The coming presidential election is the most important election in a generation, and too much is at stake for us to sit on our hands and watch this turning point in American history pass us by. Now is the time to act and speak out for what we believe in. I want to thank all of you for what you're doing to advance the cause of human freedom and limited government in North Dakota and across our nation. Keep up the fight. Sincerely, Governor Scott Walker.
I think when we talk about the fight in America, I think a lot of it's about our relationship with the government. And like I said, a lot of that's centered around the Obamacare and the healthcare fight, but I think we have local examples. Minot went through a tragedy a year ago. And we're recovering from it now, but I think we're seeing some of the indications of something's broken with our government when we find out that traffic lights aren't fixed in our city because we're waiting on Congress to make a decision. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with the system of government that requires decisions to be made in Washington, D.C. to fix traffic lights in a small Midwestern town in North Dakota. I think something's broken about that. I think something's wrong about that, and I think we need to change that by sending people to Washington who hopefully will fix that, and maybe some of those people are here tonight. I wanted to invite House candidate Kevin Cramer up to speak now. Kevin?
Thanks, Ron, and thanks, Carol. Gosh, it's really kind of touching, really, to have people of that prominence. You've got good friends. I'm impressed. Thanks for the opportunity, and great to see you all. It's hard to know even where to start at a time like this. A time when we sit here and juxtapose this area where that not just a year ago was the tragedy that Rob spoke of, and yet here we celebrate liberty. Knowing that all is not always well, but there are 49 other states that would give anything to have our challenges in North Dakota. 49 other states. 20 years ago, I was the chairman of the North Dakota Republican Party. And I guess if I could say anything to activists today, it would be embedded in this example. When I was chairman 20 years ago, and I had a full head of hair, we as a party were about where Democrats are today in North Dakota. We had 3 elected state offices. Out of 14 at the time, there were more elected offices, can you imagine, in those days, right, Matt? We had 1 chamber of the legislature and not a single member of Congress. And we were down and out. They had their foot on our throats, certain that we could never be a majority party. And you know what? A lot of us were almost certain of that. But, and I was in those days too young to know that it was impossible. I used to walk around the Capitol grounds, you guys, when I was chairman of the party in the evenings, and I'd say to myself over and over, this does not belong to them. Nor does it belong to the Republican Party. It belongs to the people of North Dakota, and it drove me. But I tell you that because it can change. This majority that Republicans are enjoying, imagine we have 12 out of 12 statewide constitutional offices in the Capitol Tower today. Supermajority in both chambers of the legislature, and 2 out of 3 members of the congressional delegation are Republicans. I never thought I'd live to see the day when we might be able to have all 3 members of North Dakota's congressional delegation be Republicans. But this is the year it can happen. But it doesn't happen by accident. It happens with hard work, rolling up your shirt sleeves, opening up the pocketbook, doing what it takes to stand up for the things you believe in, and then coming together, as Rob so eloquently pointed out earlier. Striving for perfection, but getting behind whoever it is that's closest to your views. It's an interesting time, isn't it? Imagine, just since Barack Obama's been president, 3.5 years, he has increased the national debt by it's hard to say, $5 trillion. We are looking at a $16 trillion debt. The debt exceeds the productivity of our nation's economy. But for the fact that we can print our own money in this country, we're Greece. And he longs to make us like the European socialist that he is, quite frankly. Interesting thing going on in my race. I think it's worth, I'm here, right? I should be able to talk about my race for the U.S. House. I've got this opponent who half the time talks about the fact that she'll never be partisan, and then spends the other half the time with partisan rhetoric. Look on her website. We need to change Washington. I'm going to be less partisan. My evil opponent, on the other hand, is terribly partisan. I say practice what you preach. Or sit down and put somebody else in the pulpit. We're having this interesting discussion. Yesterday was a big day in Congress for North Dakotans and for Americans. Of course, it was the vote to repeal Obamacare in the House of Representatives. 5 courageous Democrats, or should be perhaps 5 fearful Democrats, joined the Republicans to vote to repeal Obamacare. Is it going to pass this time? No, everybody knows it's not. But is it important to put people on the record? You're darn right it is. Because transparency and accountability are what's missing in Washington. The other thing that happened yesterday was the House of Representatives marked up the Farm Bill. That's of more than passing interest to North Dakotans, of course. And so I, last week, had planned to have this agricultural roundtable with our Ag Commissioner, Commissioner Doug Goring, and former Ag Secretary and Governor Ed Schaefer, and we did it in Fargo, with all the commodity groups and farm groups sitting around the table to tell me what they think about these farm bills. The Senate one that passed, the House one that was marked up. Very encouraging. And what's encouraging is that you hear it over and over from producers and commodity groups. They are tired of Washington telling them how to farm their land. That if you're going to have, and by the way, this is in the Senate Farm Bill, if you're going to participate in the programs, you have to meet our demands for conservation compliance. Strings attached to every program that's designed to provide a safety net for the farmers who know how to grow food better than anybody in the world. They said, we don't want any of that. We need to decouple that, get that out in the House. I'm grateful that that's exactly what the House is doing. And then my opponent complains about that. And then they wanted to cut a little more in the House. There's some confusion, by the way, about which version that's. It's funny, all these reporters were at my round table. They all listened to the same round table discussion. They all interviewed me at the same time afterwards. And the Fargo Forum reports I support the Senate version of the bill, and the rest of them report I support the House version of the bill. But here's what I like about the House version of the bill. They're cutting more from the programs. Not from farmers, not from this food safety net, but from what are called the nutrition programs. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a country, thanks to Barack Obama and his policies, where 1 out of 7 Americans are on food stamps. And the liberals like it that way. The only thing they'd like better would be if 2 out of 7 were on it. Because then they're under their thumb. And they're dependent. And this dependency culture that they're creating is exactly what Barack Obama aspires to. It's very much like Europe, isn't it? And so my opponent cries foul. She says, no, what about those important nutrition programs? People need to be on food stamps forever, evidently. And I said, you know, it might be reckless, but how about coming to North Dakota and seeing how we create jobs for those people? We don't need a permanent dependency welfare state in this country. We're not Europe. We are the United States of America. And ladies and gentlemen, it's not just Randy Chrisman who's on the ballot this year. It's not just Rick Berg and Jack Dalrymple and Kevin Cramer and a whole bunch of other Republicans. It's not just Mitt Romney. It's liberty itself that is on the ballot this year. Because as Paul Ryan said, this is our last chance. Now you can say what you want about John Roberts. I think a lot of us are somewhat disappointed. We didn't know what kind of a judge he was going to be. And yet he's rather profound, isn't he? Because he took this very pure, pro-democracy sort of stand in his decision on Obamacare, even though we don't like that he cast the 5th vote. When he said, it is not the court's job to bail out the voting public from their own mistakes. It is our job. And this is the year, this is the last chance, it's less than 4 months away, and we've got to do everything we can to elect, not only re-elect all of the Republicans on the ticket, but elect Rick Berg to the United States Senate, elect me to the United States House of Representatives, give North Dakota 100% Republican voice in Congress, and elect Mitt Romney President of the United States, because quite frankly, I cannot, with a clear conscience, watch my grandchildren be born with a debt that will be somewhere around $100,000 for each of them when you include all of the entitlements. It's been quite a year for Chris and I. Not only did I win this nomination to be the Republican candidate for Congress, Chris and I adopted a little boy who's with us, Abel. He's 5 now, growing up way too fast. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have our first grandchild. And I worry a lot less about how much money is coming from Washington to North Dakota than I do about how much money that grandchild is going to owe upon birth. And now we find out that that grandchild upon birth is required to purchase a product whether they want it or not. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, to roll up our sleeves and work like we've never worked before for the cause not of republicanism, but of liberty, of freedom itself. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to hang around as long as I need to answer whatever questions you might have. And Rob, if there's an opportunity, at the podium, we'll do that as well. Thank you.
By the way, if anybody wants refreshments, there's a food truck right over there.
There's food. We'll see you all. Yeah. I know this
We have next up Public Service Commission candidate Randy Chrisman. I have a few remarks. I always think it's funny when Republicans get elected to regulatory offices, given our philosophical feelings about regulations. But I think Randy, from his time in the legislature, is probably going to do what I always thought Kevin did, which is regulate reluctantly.
Well, thank you, Rob. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And I'll get into that in a little bit, because there is a time and a place for some regulations, and I want to talk about that. But first of all, when Carol mentioned feeling sometimes like people view Minot as the end of the earth, I wish those people would have been with me this noon when I was trying to finish up haying so I could get cleaned up and get here, and my hay machine broke down 1.5 miles from the nearest road. That felt like the end of the earth at the time. But I am Randy Christman, a rancher from down in the Hayes and Beulah area, and I'm running for the Public Service Commission. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about why I'm running for a regulatory position. And it probably goes back originally to when I was 17 years old and I joined the North Dakota Army National Guard, because I've always felt like I wanted to give something back and be a part of something bigger than myself. I did that in '94. I ran for the state senate and was elected. And it's amazing how the problems that we face now are big and important, but so much different than the big and important problems that we faced in the '90s. Back then, our problems revolved around young people growing up, and no matter what career field they might want to go into, there was almost no opportunity for them here. And it was such a sad thing to see good young people move thousands of miles away, set down roots, very likely to never come back to North Dakota again. Now, we don't have that problem. There's all kinds of opportunity here. Now our problems revolve around shortages of emergency workers, infrastructure shortages, these kinds of things. They're all big problems. They're all tough problems. But I'll tell you, the problems involved with a strong and vigorous economy are a lot better than the problems involved with a weak economy. So I'll take this situation any day, and we can conquer these things. As a Public Service Commission candidate, as a regulator, I do want to say there are times for regulation. Right beside my ranch are old abandoned coal mine spill piles from in the 50s and 60s when there was no regulation, and it's wasteland now, and in 100 years it'll still be wasteland. Well, it's not a criticism of what they used to do, because they didn't have the technology and the equipment and everything to do a better job and get the product out at an affordable price. But now we do have it, and we ought not ever go back to that kind of a time where we leave our land in spoils. So, you know, our mine reclamation is the kind of regulation that we need. We just need to do it well and reasonably. As a hopeful commissioner this fall, I have several philosophies that I bring to the table that I'd like to talk about. First of all, we need more infrastructure in the state. We need more oil pipelines so we can get that product to where it needs to be without taking big discounts and without paying exorbitant shipping costs on it. We need more natural gas pipelines and processing facilities. You know, natural gas is cheap now, but it's still a valuable resource that ought not to be wasted. And we need more refining capacity, because frankly, even with a strong economy, if we can add value to that product before it leaves the state, it just makes our economy stronger yet. And it makes sure that that refined product is available for us at times when it's short. So all this infrastructure development, to me, is vital. But it goes beyond that. We need to make sure that our ag producers get a fair shake when they're transporting or marketing their products. As I mentioned, we need to make sure that our land is taken care of and reclaimed. And as regulators, we need to follow the law. Because to be honest with you, even a conservative crony capitalist is still a crony capitalist. And there's a lot of things as regulators we have discretion over, but that discretion only goes so far, and we need to follow the law. So those are some of the principles that I bring to the table. And if you disagree with those, there's an option available for you. There's the liberal, kind of extreme environmentalist philosophy to regulation. You might call it the Environmental Protection Agency philosophy. where they don't try to help producers get in compliance with the laws and the rules, where they try and set up roadblocks and drive up the costs so that their friends with an alternative method of producing that product can finally be competitive. And like I say, if that's your philosophy and what you want in a regulator, there's that option available. But if you like my philosophy, which I think is similar to the philosophy of people like Kevin and Rick Berg, who's spokesperson you'll hear from shortly, and most of the other Republican candidates on the ballot, and some of these fine legislators that I've had just a wonderful opportunity to work with over the years in my time in the Senate that are sitting here tonight, then I'm asking for your support. And I'll be around. We can visit at length until you're ready to go home. I'm here for the evening. By the time I get home, it'll be too late to do anything anyways. So I'll be around. There's envelopes and brochures back there that'll tell you more about me and give you an opportunity to volunteer or contribute. Best way to find me is to just go to randychrisman.com and you can learn more about me. Just don't forget, Chrisman has 2 N's. Look me up. Thanks again for the opportunity, and if there's questions or you want to visit about anything, I'll be around. Thanks a lot.
We invited Congressman Berg, of course, to run for the Senate, but he's also Congressman Berg, which means that sometimes he's got to be in Washington, D.C. to cast votes, which yesterday I think somebody mentioned there was a vote against Obamacare, which I don't think was a waste of time at all. I think it was a very important vote to express continued support. By the way, there was a new Rasmussen poll out today, which, in addition to showing that Congressman Berg is leading in that Senate race by 9 points, also showed that 67% of North Dakotans still oppose Obamacare. There was a CNN headline yesterday when the Congress voted on the health care law, which said that Americans are tired of the health care debate. I don't think North Dakota's tired of the health care debate. I think we're still very much engaged on the issue. Anyway, I wanted to invite, the Congressman sent a representative from his campaign. I wanted to invite her up to speak on behalf.
Thank you so much for inviting us to be here and participate this evening. My name is Lindsay Christman, with 1 N, not 2 like Randy, and I'm in the Bismarck office. We are also working on eventually having a presence here in Minot as well, but until that happens, I'm kind of your Western rep, so please feel free to contact me with any questions or concerns. And actually, the Congressman prepared a few comments tonight that Roger has graciously agreed to share. So I will be here this evening as well. I have no time limit, so feel free to seek me out with any kind of questions you have, or if you need any merchandise, t-shirts, flair, bumper sticker for your car, please see me. But otherwise, Roger, if you'd like to share a few words from Rick. Thank you.
I was asked to read this statement. It says, I'm sorry that I could not attend your event this evening. Even though it's always best to be in North Dakota, I'm currently in Washington, D.C. and was unable to make it here tonight. Just yesterday, I voted again to repeal Obamacare. This was the 33rd time I have voted to repeal, dismantle, or defund Obamacare. But Harry Reid and the Democrat-controlled Senate continue to block our efforts. This is why November is so important. There is a clear choice for voters in this election. I will continue to fight back against President Obama's agenda of debt and decline, while my opponent, Heidi Heitkamp, campaigned for President Obama, endorsed Obamacare, and will support his agenda. I appreciate all the work you do. I wish you a successful event tonight, and please reach out to our staff member, Lindsay, for more information or to join our team. You can find her at our, you can find her at our Berg for Senate table. With your help and support, we will win in November, change the U.S. Senate, and restore the promise of the American dream. Thank you, and God bless. Signed, Rick Berg.
Watching as my daughter was currently assimilated by the Berg campaign, who has been tagging every single person who's been going by this year. An important part of the Tea Parties, I think, since we held some of the first ones on 4th of July, actually, 2009, was we always allowed the audience to speak as well, because this wasn't supposed to be a events where people came and were spoke at. It was supposed to be events where we came and communicated with one another. So if anybody had anything they wanted to speak out about or to say, now's the time. We have microphones we can bring to you. Just raise your hand. This is always the hard part, is getting the first person to speak if anybody wants to.
Is there a tea party in Minot?
Is there there's not an ongoing group, I guess. There's a, I don't know.